make a disclaimer first. Yung mga information po na i-share ko dito is valid as of today lang po. Napaka-fluid po kasi ng mga regulations, so nagbabago-bago siya. So yung information po na i-share ko this morning should be taken as valid as of today lang po. For most updated information, you may visit Canada's official government websites. There are three main agencies that you should be focusing with. Number one dyan is yung Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada. There's the website, cic.gc.ca. Sa border services naman, that's cbsa-asfc.gc.ca. And for information on traveling to, from, and within Canada, visit travel.gc.ca. So before you leave for Canada, make sure to check if there are latest updates regarding the restrictions. All right. The first thing you need to do is to coordinate with your school or yung designated learning institution, your travel itineraries and quarantine plan. Wag po kayong pupunta sa Canada nang hindi coordinated ang travel niyo po with your school. That will be a huge problem po. Baka magkaroon kayo ng problem dun sa port of entry kapag hindi aware ang school, your school, that you will be arriving in Canada on that date. Alright? So, sandali po ulit, may papasok lang po ulit. It covers. All right, so that's the disclaimer. Our topics for this morning, there are 5 main topics. Number 1 dyan, yung travel-related checklist, vaccination requirements, ano ba yung tungkol sa travel insurance, quarantine plan, and lastly, about application for permanent residence. Majority, if not all of our clients who are studying in Canada are actually doing this to apply for permanent residence. So we will be talking about that as well. All right. So let's start with the checklist. So there are 10 items here na i-explain ko po isa-isa yan. This should be your checklist. Lahat ito ay mahalaga, no? Na naiintindihan nyo kung ano yung mga purpose. Number 1, passport with valid visa. Of course, hindi kayo makakaalis kung wala kayong valid na visa. You may have a valid visa pero baka expired na ang inyong medical examination. So make sure na valid pa rin po ang inyong medical exam. Ang medical exam po ninyo ay valid for 1 year. So kung ang medical examination nyo was taken more than a year ago, most likely, hindi na po valid ang inyong travel document. So you will have to take another examination, medical examination, send the medical examination result sa Ottawa, and then wait until na maging valid po ang inyong travel document before po kayo mag-book ng flight. Otherwise, maho-hold lang po kayo sa airport, hindi kayo makakaalis. Why? Bakit siya nangyayari? Minsan kasi, may mga cases na matagal nang nag-apply pero nag-online class sa Philippines, and then tsaka pa lang siya pupunta sa Canada after 1 semester or 2. And then by that time, maaaring expired na yung medical, so hindi ka na makakaalis kahit valid ang iyong visa. Alright? So check niyo po kung kailan kayo nag-medical. Kung more than 1 year na po yan, take another medical examination. Letter of introduction. Kadalasan kasabay ito doon sa visa kapag natanggap nyo yung visa ninyo. Meron din silang pinapadalang soft copy. Kung wala pa kayong kopya, coordinate with your documentation specialist para meron kayong copy ng letter of introduction. Alright? And then, kailangan nyo rin po ng letter of acceptance. Kailangan nyo i-print po. No? Letter of acceptance or confirmation of enrollment. Letter of acceptance kung hindi ka pa nag-start ng class mo, or confirmation of enrollment in the event na nag-online class ka, first term, and then pupunta ka sa Canada to take yung second term, so kailangan mo ng confirmation that you are actually enrolled. Right? I-print nyo po yan. Kailangan nyo rin pong i-print yung tuition payment receipt, regardless kung 1 term yan or 1 year. So dapat naka-print po yung inyong tuition fee receipt. Proof of funds, it may be in a form of cash or yung GIC po ninyo. So ang question dito is, magkano ba ang dapat na dala nyo papuntang Canada? Right? Magkano yung kailangan nyo dala? Ang sagot dyan is, expected na dala po ninyo is at least 1 year tuition and 1 year living expenses allowance. So it varies kung magkano yung 1 year tuition, and sa living expenses allowance naman, depende kung ilan po kayo. If, for example, your 1 year tuition is $15,000 and you're single, so ang living expenses allowance is 10,000 Canadian dollars. So you are expected to bring 25,000 Canadian dollars. What if bayad mo na yung 1 year tuition and then meron kang GIC, right? Bayad mo na yung 1 year tuition and then meron kang GIC, technically, na-comply mo na yung minimum requirement. So, yung cash na dadalhin mo, depende na lang kung magkano yung kaya mong dalhin. Right? So, as far as the technical requirement is concerned, kung ganun yung nangyari, kahit magkano na lang yung dala mo. If, for example naman, bayad mo yung 1 year tuition, pero wala kang GIC and you are single, so yung cash na dala mo at least dapat ay 10,000 Canadian dollars. Minimum. Right? So, later, i-expound po natin yung tungkol dito sa funds. Pero that is the idea. So, dapat meron kang available na funds good for 1 year tuition and 1 year living expenses. Kailangan mo rin ng travel insurance. Right? Meron ka ng medical insurance provided ng school, pero usually yung coverage niyan starts at the start ng class. So later, i-discuss natin yan further. Okay? But that is really important. Proof of vaccination. Kung vaccinated ka na, kailangan mo magdala ng proof na vaccinated ka na. No? I-explain natin yan in details mamaya. Mandatory din yung COVID-19 test before ka umalis, 72 hours before your flight. Mandatory requirement po siya. Alright? So, quarantine plan. Alright. Ang quarantine plan, yung fully vaccinated na travelers, technically, exempted na siya sa 14-day quarantine upon arrival sa Canada. That's the general rules. However, ang decision whether you will be exempted or not doon sa 14-day quarantine will be decided sa port of entry. Having said that, whether you are fully vaccinated or not, dapat may prepared ka pa rin na quarantine plan. I-expound natin yan later. Right? So these are just checklist. Arrive can receipt. Yung Arrive can is an app, mandatory requirement yan. Mag-download kayo ng app, yung Arrive can, and then i-enter nyo dyan yung information, submit nyo yung details before your flight, and then before you board the plane, and then it is better na i-print nyo po yan. No? Baka kasi mag-malfunction yan later, hindi mo ba ipakita sa apps kasi either lobat ka or nag-malfunction yung phone mo. So better meron kang hard copy na proof na nag-submit ka ng information mo through the app. Right? I-explain ko po yan details later. So these are the 10 items na necessary ay available po sa inyo. Isa-isahin po natin yan. Okay, so funds. Ang common question dito is, bawal ba na magdala ng more than $10,000 in cash? Actually, hindi. No? Ang requirement lang ng anti-money laundering law is that if you are bringing in more than 10,000 Canadian dollars or equivalent, ang kailangan mo lang ay i-declare So, depende kung saang airport ka lalapag, pwedeng bigyan ka ng declaration card, fill out mo, may question doon, meron ka bang talang cash na more than $10,000. So, you just need to confirm or answer yes kung meron kang dala. Alright? So, hindi siya bawal. Now, going back doon sa sinabi ko kanina na ang minimum requirement is at least ang dala mo ay 1 year 1 year na tuition and 1 year living expenses. No? So yun yung expected na dala mo papuntang Canada. Now, kung bayad mo na yung 1 year tuition and meron ka ng GIC na amounting to $10,000, ang question dyan is, kailangan mo bang i-declare na meron kang dalang more than 10,000. If for example, nagbayad ka ng 1 year tuition, 15,000, may GIC ka na $10,000, and then meron kang dalang cash na 5,000. Question, required ba na i-declare mo na meron kang 10,000 or more? The answer is no. Kasi yung 10,000 na GIC and 15,000 na tuition receipt, hindi mo siya dala. In fact, nasa Canada na siya. So technically, hindi mo dala yon. Ang dala mo lang is yung 5,000 cash. Right? So hindi mo kailangan i-declare na meron kang $10,000. Again, hindi bawal na magdala ng more than 10,000 cash. Ang kailangan lang ay i-declare mo when asked kung may dala kang more than $10,000. Alright? Another common question here is, what if bayad mo yung 1 year tuition, wala kang GIC, pero wala kang $10,000 na pwede mong dalhin. Alright? Let's say ang available mo lang na cash is 5,000. So kung $5,000 lang yung dala mo, tapos wala kang GIC, and meron kang 1 year tuition fee na paid na, then hindi mo pa nakukumpla yung minimum requirement. That could be a problem. Hindi naman sila masyadong mahigpit recently, no? Pero technically, hindi mo nakukumpla yung minimum requirement. So kung $5,000 lang yung dala mo, short ka ng 5,000 Canadian dollars, yung alternative dyan is dependent doon sa circumstances mo. If for example, meron kang sponsor, so kailangan i-print mo yung letter of support and proof ng financial capacity ng sponsor mo. If for example naman, ikaw yung tipong ayaw mong dalhin yung cash na madami dahil natatakot ka, so ang options mo are, one, let's say gusto mo, meron kang $20,000 na cash na pwede mong dalhin, pero natatakot kang dalhin na in cash. No? So what you may do, dalhin mo yung 5,000 Canadian dollars cash, yung 15,000, pwede kang magpagawa ng bank draft. Bank draft is basically parang manager's check, kaya lang internationally accepted. Yung manager's or cashier's check, locally accepted lang yan. Bank draft, pwede mo siyang magamit internationally. So magpapagawa ka ng bank draft, let's say 15,000 Canadian dollars or US dollars, doesn't really matter, na nakapangalan sa'yo. The idea is, upon arrival in Canada, gagamitin mo yung $5,000 to open an account, and then i-deposit mo yung bank draft na dala mo. So merong some sort of security. Alright? Ngayon, kung hindi mo naman tipo na mag-type na magpagawa ng bank draft, so another alternative would be to get a bank certificate of a week before your travel. So ang approach naman doon is that if asked bakit kulang yung dala mo, pwede mong sabihin na hindi mo dinala lahat kasi natatakot ka, pero may pera ka pa back in the Philippines na anytime pwede mong i-transfer, you have access sa funds na yon. As proof, ito yung bank certificate. Alright? Pero kung kaya mo rin lang naman dalhin yung required amount, dalhin nyo na po. Okay? So hindi naman po siya problem. Another approach is kung meron kang debit card na merong Mastercard or Visa, pwedeng pwede mo ma-access yung funds na yon while in Canada as long as may Mastercard yan or Visa doon sa debit card. Right? So again, kung may mga questions po kayo after the presentation, magkakaroon naman po tayo ng Q&A. No? So ang approach natin dyan is that wait to be recognized before you talk. So raise your hand, click the icon to raise your hand, and then wait to be recognized bago po kayo magsalita para organize po tayo. I am very sure marami po kayo magiging question. Alright? Kung hindi malinaw or merong mga clarification about dun sa funds, pwede po natin siyang pag-usapan mamaya. Alright? Alright. So, bakit kailangan nyo ng medical or travel insurance? Ito yung context po. Una, as international student, kasama na sa binayaran mo sa school yung medical insurance. There are two issues. Number one, yung medical insurance coverage na binayaran mo ay applicable lang sa'yo. Hindi kasama sa coverage ang yung dependents. That's number one issue. Second, yung medical insurance coverage mo usually starts day one, no? Kapag nag-start na yung class. That would mean if you will arrive in Canada 30 days before the start of the school, doon sa first 30 days mo, wala kang coverage. Right? So delikado yun. Halimbawa ay nagkaroon ng mga medical emergencies. So baka yung dala mong cash ay mapunta lang doon sa hospitalization. Medyo madugo po yun. No? Kaya mahalaga na meron kang at least travel or medical insurance covering you for the first 30 days habang hindi pa nag-take effect yung coverage mo from the school. So, kung meron ka ng medical insurance from the school at meron kang kasamang spouse and kids, so we strongly suggest na you contact your school's insurance provider para idagdag nyo po sa coverage ang inyong spouse and kids. So magbabayad kayo ng additional premium. Alright? So hindi naman necessary na doon din sa insurance provider ng school. So it's basically kahit sa ang insurance provider wala naman po problema. But logical po niyan is isama nyo na po siya doon sa insurance coverage nyo na kinuha doon sa insurance provider. No? Idagdag nyo na lang po yung spouse and kids. Alright? And the same manner, kung kukuha kayo ng travel insurance for the first 30 days, dapat buong family din, lahat ng family members may coverage. The idea is that in the event na nagkaroon ng medical emergencies, hindi mauubos ang inyong cash. Meron na pong ilang instances na upon arrival sa Canada, few days after nagkaroon ng COVID, may dalawang instances dyan na Filipino from the Philippines. Yung isa may medical insurance coverage prior dun sa start ng school. Yung isang kasi yung may medical insurance coverage is nagkataon na papuntang Fanshawe College. Sa Fanshawe, ang insurance coverage niya starts 30 days before the start of school. Alright? But generally speaking, most of the schools, ang start ng coverage niyan ay doon sa first day of class. Alright? Pero merong from the Philippines din na nagkaroon ng medical emergencies na walang insurance coverage. So medyo nagkaroon sila ng problema financially. Alright? So hindi ko po kayo tinatakot. This is really important. Saan kayo kukuha ng travel insurance? Usually yung mga airlines nag-o-offer ng travel insurance. Pare-parehas lang naman yan, nag-iiba lang sa mga free, mga rider benefits. But meron kaming list ng mga trusted na insurance agents who are based in Canada. That's the URL. Visit nyo lang po yung URL na yan. And then you may get in touch directly with those insurance agents. Bahala na po kayo kung kanino kayo kukuha. Alright? That is just to make this easier for you. Again, mahalaga na meron po kayong insurance coverage. Ang insurance coverage ng school starts usually sa first day ng school. So kung darating kayo sa Canada 30 days before this start of school, it is important na meron kayong coverage dun sa first 30 days na yan. Alright? Okay. What happened? Siguraduhin ko lang po na topic natin lahat. Alright. Sa vaccination requirement naman. As of November 30, no, starting November 30, only fully vaccinated travelers will be allowed to board domestic flights and trains. Medyo may gray area ito. No? So, kung hindi ka fully vaccinated at darating ka, let's say, December 1, problema ito kung ang destination mo is, for example, sa Saskatchewan or sa Alberta, kasi kailangan mo ng connecting flight doon. Halimbawa, pupunta ka sa Calgary, for example. Usually, Vancouver yung port of entry mo. So, walang problema sa pagpasok mo sa Vancouver. Pero yung connecting flight mo from Vancouver to Alberta, to Calgary to be specific, domestic flight siya. And as a rule, kung hindi ka fully vaccinated as of November 30, you are technically not allowed na mag-board doon sa domestic flight. So, paano ka makakapunta sa Calgary? Pwede kang mag-drive, no? Or mag-bus, no? Kasi ang coverage lang naman dyan is flights and trains. Now, most of the schools na nakakausap namin, strictly ini-implement nila yan. No? So ang gusto nilang mangyari is that dapat you arrive in Canada on or before November 29. However, there are other schools which recognizes the fact na may mga exemptions dyan. As long as yung connecting flight mo is within 24 hours upon arrival, vaccinated or not, makakasakay ka pa rin ng domestic flight. Alright? Now, pero starting January 15, kailangan fully vaccinated ka na para makapasok sa Canada if you are an international student or a temporary foreign worker. Alright? So, kailangan fully vaccinated ka na. Now, initially, there are only 4 vaccines na recognized and accepted sa Canada: Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and Janssen. Pero starting November 30, 2021, Canada will start to recognize yung Covaxin, Sinopharm, Sinovac. So kung vaccinated ka na Sinovac, hindi na yan magiging problem kahit ang arrival mo sa Canada is after November 30. Or after January 15. No? So kasi recognized na yung Sinovac starting November 30. Pero kung darating ka sa Canada let's say November 28, no? Darating ka sa Canada November 28, tapos may connecting flight ka, may transition period pa yun. No? So vaccinated or not, hindi siya problema. Pero let's not complicate things. Kung meron kayong opportunity na makapagpa-vaccine po kayo, get vaccinated. No? Hindi lang dahil dito sa boarding requirements, but for your safety and your family's safety. Alright? So, mahalaga na vaccinated po kaya. Alright? So, again, kung medyo may mga questions dito sa vaccination requirements, pwede po natin siya pag-usapan. Alright. So, yung arrival test upon test upon arrival, ngayon parang randomly na lang siya ginagawa. Pero para smooth yung in case na randomly i-require kayo ng test upon arrival, mas maganda na naka-register na kayo. Depende kung saan kayo mag-land. So sa Toronto, yan yung registration site, Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal. So mag-register na kayo. Hindi man talaga siya registration person. Magki-create lang kayo ng account. Para in the event na i-require kayo ng test, madali na yung process. And depende doon sa province na pupuntahan po ninyo, meron silang mga kanya-kanyang travel restrictions. it is important na i-check nyo po ito before po kayo mag-book, before kayo umalis. So, check nyo po yung URL na yan. Alright? Iba't ibang province, iba't iba yung kanilang mga travel restrictions. Yung mga dinidiscuss ko po dito is basically general information po yan. Alright. Sorry about that. Alright. So, requirement naman ito sa mga holder ng open work permit or ito yung mga dependent ng spouse. Of course, kailangan mo rin ng passport, letter of introduction. Mahalaga yung marriage certificate or proof of relationship. So maaaring hanapin siya doon sa immigration, both sa Pilipinas at sa Canada. Travel insurance, na-explain na natin, vaccination, COVID test, quarantine plan, arrive country, isa-isa natin. Now, important, kahit recently, may mga instances pa rin na yung spouses, dependent ng international student, ay hinahanapan ng immigration dito sa Pilipinas ng OEC, yung Overseas Employment Clearance Certificate. Right? So, as a rule, dahil hindi ka naman na-recruit ng employer sa Canada, hindi required na dumaan ka sa POEA and hindi ka kailangan kumuha ng travel clearance or exit clearance mula sa POEA. But for some reason, yung ibang mga immigration officers na matye-tiyempohan ninyo, hahanapan kayo. At may mga nahohon. No? So, para maging smooth yung experience nyo dito sa Philippine Immigration, i-print nyo na po itong makikita nyo diyang memo mula sa POEA. So, yan po yung URL. Print nyo po and then ipakita nyo po doon sa immigration officer in the event na hanapan kayo ng OEC. Yung memo po na yan specifically states na yung open work permit holder na dependent ng international student ay exempted sa OEC. So in the event na yung immigration officer ay hindi familiar, they will be. Right? So i-print nyo po yan kasi nangyayari pa rin po yan, unfortunately. Right? But definitely, hindi po required yung OEC sa open work permit holders. Right? Alright. So, para saan ba yung quarantine plan? Alright. Like I've said earlier, kung fully vaccinated ka, technically exempted ka sa quarantine, 14-day quarantine. Kaya lang yung decision whether you will be exempted or not will be determined at the port of entry. Okay? So upon assessment ng mga officers sa borders, wala kang mga symptoms, etc. So hindi ka i-require. Pero kapag sa assessment nila ay kailangan mong mag-quarantine, you should be ready doon sa quarantine plan mo. Kaya ang right approach dyan is mag-prepare ka pa rin ng quarantine plan. Kasi mas mahirap gumawa ng quarantine plan on the spot. Right? Saan ka titira? Right? Kung wala. So magiging problem pa yan. So i-prepare nyo pa rin po yung inyong 14 kung saan kayo magko-quarantine. Kung saan kayo magko-quarantine, depende yan doon sa circumstances po ninyo. Pwede sa mga private residence, pwedeng sa mga kamag-anak po ninyo, pwedeng sa hotel, Airbnb. Ang mahalaga, meron kayong identified na tutuluyan nyo for the first 14 days. Kung sa kamag-anak nyo po yan, pwede naman as long as naka-isolate po kayo. May sarili kayong restroom, right? May access kayo sa pagkain, mga gamot, and other basic needs. So, kapag nag-coordinate kayo sa school, most of the schools, tatanungin kayo about your quarantine plan. Yung iba, may mga portals wherein sasagutan mo doon kung saan ka magko-quarantine. Yung iba naman, may mga forms na binibigay. In the event na yung school nyo ay walang standard na form or portal kung saan kayo magpo-provide ng inyong quarantine plan, meron kaming ginawang template. Yan po yung URL. You can download it. Pwede nyo ma-download yan. I-fill out nyo lang po. So yung mga information na yan, yung kailangan doon sa quarantine plan. Alright? So again, this is important. Vaccinated or not, it is highly recommended na mag-prepare pa rin po kayo ng quarantine plan. Kasi ang determination kung exempted kayo sa quarantine is sa port of entry upon arrival niyo po sa Canada. Alright? Right. So, ito yung nag-iisang app na mandatory kailangan nyo pong i-download. Kung may family members po kayo, hindi naman kailangan lahat kayo merong i-download. Isa lang po, sa principal applicant na lang. So, ililist na lang nila yung pangalan. So, yung ArriveCan app, gagamitin nyo ito para sa pag-submit. Before you board your plane, kailangan yung i-submit yung inyong travel itineraries. Anong flight, anong oras, flight number, etc. Kasama dyan sa ilalam nyo is yung your quarantine plan. So saan ka tutuloy for the first 14 days. Upon submission, mas maganda i-print nyo po. May makukuha kayong receipt upon submission. So pwede nyo i-save yun sa phone, pero it is best na i-print nyo po para may hard copy kayo. In the event na hindi nyo siya makita, nag-malfunction yung phone or whatever, at least may hard copy po kayo. Where to download yung ArriveCan app? Yan po yung URL. Na-download nyo po yan sa App Store or sa Google Play. Alright? In the event na i-require ka ng quarantine, gagamitin mo yung ArriveCan app para i-record mo yung self-monitoring. Ano yung temperature mo daily, kung may symptoms ka ba or not. So gagamitin mo siya. Failure to do that, medyo serious na violation yun. Pwede kang magkaroon ng problem. So mandatory na meron kang ArriveCan app. Alright? Download it as soon as possible pa. Alright. COVID-19 hygiene kits, this is hindi siya mandatory requirement, more on practical lang po ito, suggestion. Mas mahirap kasing kung kailan nasa Canada kayo, tsaka kayo maghahanap kung saan bibili ng mga disposable face mask, etc., mga sanitizer. So pwedeng magdala na po kayo yan. So pwede kayo magdala, ilagay check-in luggage, meron din kayong pwedeng dalhin sa carry-on luggage po ninyo. Again, these are more like a suggestion, practical tips. Alright, so nakalampas na kayo sa Philippine immigration, nakarating na kayo sa Canada. Having a visa is not a guarantee that you will be allowed entry sa Canada. So before kayo tuluyang papasukin sa Canada, before kayo bigyan ng study permit or work permit, sa port of entry, sa immigration, meron doong immigration officer na magkakandak ng interview sa inyo. Kapag nasatisfy nyo yung mga requirements, na-convince yung immigration officer sa port of entry, that's the only time that you will be allowed entry sa Canada, and then you will be issued the necessary permits. Usually, yung mga tanong lang naman dyan sa port of entry is tungkol sa purpose of your travel. Bakit ka pupunta ng Canada? Sabihin mo, mag-aaral ka. Kung ano lang yung itanong, yun lang po yung sagutin. Pag tinanong kayo ano yung program, dapat naman masagot po ninyo yan. Medyo problema yan kung pati name ng school nyo ay hindi nyo masagot. No? So wag lang po kayong kabahan. Wala naman dyan magiging problema. So basically, yung magiging question nila dyan is more like validation lang siya doon sa information na meron sila na isinabit ninyo nung nag-apply kayo ng visa at i-confirm yan sa inyo. Again, pwede kayong tanungin about your financial capacity, kaya mahalaga na aware kayo, inform kayo kung magkano ba dapat yung dala po ninyo. And pwede rin kayong tanungin about your quarantine plan. Right? Kaya mahalaga na meron kayong printed na copy ng inyong quarantine plan. Pag wala naging problema, then you will be issued the study permit. Right? Ganito yung itsura ng study permit. Pag natanggap niyo po yan, tingnan nyo lang yung name, other details, kailangan consistent po siya and accurate po. Like yung date of birth, yung full name po ninyo, etc. And kung study permit yung pinag-usapan, mahalaga po itong portion na yan. Medyo enlarge po natin. Right? So, yung study permit po ninyo comes with a work rights. Hindi na kayo bibigyan ng separate na work permit. with your study permit, as long as meron diyang nakalagay na remarks or condition stating na allowed kang magtrabaho, then you will be allowed to work part-time. Kung walang remarks or conditions na nakalagay to that effect na pwede kang magtrabaho, hindi ka makakapag-apply ng SIN and therefore hindi ka makakapagtrabaho. So kung nabigyan ka ng study permit na walang nakalagay na ganyang conditions, pwede mong ipa-reprint yung study permit mo. Alright? Kung hindi mo siya napansin, well, ibabalik natin yung study permit po ninyo, tapos hihintayin muna natin makarating ulit bago kayo makapag-apply ng SIN and therefore, madidelay yung pagtatrabaho po ninyo. Alright? So mahalaga na i-check niyo po yan. Ngayon, kung ang program po ninyo ay may kasamang co-op placement, mabibigyan kayo ng second na permit, yung co-op work permit. Alright? Pero kung yung program po ninyo ay wala namang co-op component, then study permit lang yung ibibigay po sa inyo. Kung ang program nyo halimbawa ay may co-op placement requirement, pero hindi ka nabigyan ng co-op work permit, pwede naman siyang i-apply at a later date. So walang problema po yan. Alright? Yung spouse and kids na kasama po ninyo, mabibigyan din sila ng kaukulang permit. Yung spouse po ninyo mabibigyan ng open work permit, yung anak po ninyo mabibigyan ng study permit or temporary resident permit, depende sa kanyang edad. Usually kapag 4-year-old and up, study permit na po yung ibibigay. Okay? So, we encourage na, kung ang contract niyo po sa amin ay hanggang PR application, please send us copy of your permits para meron kaming records at ma-monitor po namin yung mga expiration and ma-check din kung everything is in order. Kung halimbawa nagkataon na wala yung ganyang condition, ibabalik natin yung inyong study permit. Kaya pwede niyo po siya ipa-reprint in the event na ganyan po yung nangyari. Right? Okay, pagdating sa accommodation, again, kaya mahalaga na mag-coordinate kayo dun sa school kasi some of the schools provide assistance sa accommodation and arrival services. Pero kahit naman wala yun, or kahit worst scenario, wala kayong kahit isang kakilala sa Canada, hindi naman talaga siya dapat maging problema. Through these websites, pwede kayong makahanap ng mga room or apartment na pwede nyo i-rent. Right? So, usually, ang nangyayari dyan is sa first week or two, nandun kasi kung lalo na kung kailangan ng quarantine, so sa first week or two, then pwede kayo mag-Airbnb or hotel habang naka-quarantine kayo, naghahanap kayo ng mga vacancies ng room, apartment, and then after quarantine, pwede nyo pong puntahan. And kapag nagustuhan nyo, tsaka nyo siya upahan, no? Or bayaran yung down payment. Pero kung meron kayong mga kamag-anak, kaibigan na willing tumulong sa inyo sa paghahanap, that will be better. Pero again, hindi naman siya problem talaga. Alright? Okay. So, meron na kayong work permit, magtatrabaho na kayo. For the international students, allowed lang kayong magtrabaho kapag nag-start na yung school. Alright? So hindi kayo pwedeng magtrabaho hanggat hindi pa nagsisimula yung school. Pero yung spouse, pwede silang magtrabaho. Alright? Kahit hindi pa kayo nag-start mag-schooling. Okay? So, pero bago kayo makapagtrabaho, kailangan may nakapag-apply na kayo ng SIN. So habang naka-quarantine kayo, sa first week po ninyo, pwede nyo siyang gawin. Ang main requirements sa SIN application is your study permit or work permit plus yung permanent address po ninyo. Kasi doon nila ipapadeliver yung inyong SIN. Okay. Saan kayo maghahanap ng trabaho? Mas madali na po yan kapag nasa Canada na po kayo. But basic po niyan is yung job bank ng Canada. So nandiyan po lahat ng job vacancies. Alright? Okay. Alright, so second part, yung PR application. Depende sa circumstances po ninyo, pwedeng mapabilis yung PR application. Regardless kung saang program, whether it's express entry or provincial nominee program, ang general requirement para makapag-apply kayo ng permanent residence sa Canada is meron kayong 1 year eligible Canadian work experience. Yun yung main requirement. No? So, ang isang scenario na pwedeng mangyari, halimbawa, if you are married at kasama mo yung spouse na pumunta sa Canada, yung spouse with an open work permit, kapag nagkaroon siya ng 1 year eligible Canadian work experience, at that point, pwede nang i-process yung PR application. Ang pinaka-basic pa rin is yung Canadian Experience Class. Right? Pero pwede kayong mag-apply din ng provincial nominee program. Depende kung nasa ang province kayo, iba't iba yung kanilang mga criteria. The good thing about express entry application, yung Canadian Experience Class, hindi required ang support ng employer. Pero sa provincial nominee program, kadalasan required yung sponsorship ng employer. Sa Canadian Experience Class, ang kailangan mo lang is 1 year na eligible work experience. For example, ano ba yung eligible work experience? Sa accounting department, for example. Ang accounting clerk, hindi siya eligible na work experience. Pero yung bookkeeper, accounting supervisor, accounting manager, pwede. Kung office work yan, an administrative assistant, eligible na work experience yan. So kung meron kang 1 year na experience as admin assistant, pwede ka na mag-apply ng permanent residence. Sa restaurant, for example, food server. Ang food server ay hindi eligible na work experience. Pero yung food server supervisor, restaurant supervisor, restaurant manager, cook, chef, so eligible yun na work experience. So if your contract with us is hanggang PR, communicate po kayo sa amin. Most of our clients, kapag meron ng job offer, nagtatanong muna sa amin kung eligible ba yung trabaho na yun before nila tanggapin. So, magtutulungan po tayo yan hanggang maging permanent resident po kayo. Ngayon, kung ang contract nyo naman po sa amin ay hanggang study visa lang, you may want to sign up for the PR application para kapag mag-a-apply kayo ng post-graduation work permit, or kailangan ng study permit extension, at kung may employer na mag-nominate sa inyo, kailangan ng nomination application hanggang sa PR application, then kasama po yun sa aming assistance kung ang package po ninyo ay hanggang PR. Right? So, provincial nominee program, again, depende yan dun sa province. For example, sa British Columbia, meron akong client dyan, registered nurse sa Vancouver, nag-aral. And then yung asawa niya, architecture graduate dito sa Pilipinas, hindi siya registered, wala ring formal work experience, puro mga self-employment lang. Pagdating sa Canada, naging permanent resident sila, hindi dahil dun sa registered nurse na nag-aral. Naging registered nurse, naging permanent resident sila dahil doon sa spouse niya na nagkaroon ng trabaho as a general laborer sa isang food manufacturing business. Nagkataon na sa British Columbia, eligible and in demand yung ganong occupation, kaya qualified sila sa British Columbia Provincial Nominee Program. Right? May mga paminsan-minsan, just like this year, meron silang in-introduce na temporary public policy, yung temporary resident to permanent residence. Ang requirement lang para makapag-apply ka ng permanent resident is that graduate ka and then nagtatrabaho ka, regardless kung ano yung trabaho mo. Kaya lang, yung program na yun ay sarado na ngayon. So, panahon, pwedeng i-open ulit yung program na yun. Bonus lang po yan. But with or without that program, ang basic pathway pa rin is yung express entry. Kaya mahalaga na before kayo umalis sana, kung binasa niyo po yung emails na pinadala namin, we actually sent you an email para i-prepare na ang inyong education credential assessment. So mas madaling i-process yan habang nandito kayo sa Pilipinas. So yung natapos yung degree, ipapa-evaluate yan sa Canada kung ano yung equivalent niya. So before kayo umalis, pwede nyo na siyang i-process. Yung mga work experiences nyo within the last 10 years dito sa Pilipinas, kailangan kumuha na rin kayo ng Certificate of Employment with all the details required. We've sent you an email po. Go back to our emails, nandun po yung mga guide kung ano yung mga kailangan nyo i-prepare for purposes ng PR application. Yung CELPIP or yung IELTS language test, hindi naman necessary na i-take nyo po yan kaagad. Kung ang spouse yung mag-a-apply as principal applicant sa PR application, then pwede siyang mag-take ng IELTS kapag nakakuha na siya ng 1 year na experience. Sa international student naman, dapat before ka graduate, mag-start ka na rin kumuha ng IELTS or CELPIP para kapag nag-open yung mga temporary public policy na programs for PR, immediately pwede ka na makapag-apply. So walang urgency na mag-take ka kaagad ng IELTS. That is because yung IELTS po or yung CELPIP is valid lang for 2 years. So baka masayang. Alright? On the other hand, yung Education Credential Assessment is valid for 5 years. Right? So there. Yung Atlantic Immigration Pilot naman, kung pupunta kayo sa Atlantic Provinces, basically kailangan nyo po dito ng endorsement ng employer, right? Pero again, regardless kung saan province kayo pupunta, mas realistic yung pathway to PR through Canadian Experience Class. All you need is 1 year eligible Canadian work experience. Right? If you're single, well, kailangan mo munang makagraduate, walang shortcut, no? Tapusin mo yung program, pag natapos mo yung 2-year program mo, meron kang 3 years na open work permit, yung post-graduation work permit. And within that 3-year period, kailangan makagain ka ng 1 year na Canadian work experience para makapag-apply ka ng permanent residence. Alright? With or without a full-time offer or sponsorship from employer, pwede kayong mag-gain PR through express entry. I hope that's clear. Pero kung may mga questions po, pwede naman natin siyang sagutin mamaya. Alright. Mahalaga din na huwag niyong ihiwalay yung sarili niyo sa community. Start by joining sa mga Filipino communities, sa mga schools. Like for example, sa Pancio College, we started this Facebook group. Ngayon, napaka-active niya. Almost 2,000 I think yung members dito. So what do you get from here? Well, pwede kayo, immediate support network. No? Pwede kayong ano ba yan? Maraming mga graduates na ng Pancio College ang nagpo-post dyan ng mga job vacancies kung saan sila nagtatrabaho. Meron ding mga nagbebenta ng mga lumang libro. So instead na bumili ka ng bago, makakamura ka. Right? Accommodation, mga room vacancies, maraming posting dyan. No? So join yung be active, no, sa community kasi Canada is very strong doon sa community spirit. No? Medyo mahihirapan ka na mag-settle, mag-survive kung i-isolate mo yung sarili mo sa community. So start by joining Filipino community. Kung sa pupuntahan mong school ay wala pang similar na group, create one, no? Para merong mutual support network. Alright? So nasa last part na ako ng slides. Kung may mga questions po kayo, you may click yung or raise your hand, click nyo lang po yung icon, wait to be recognized, and then I'll be happy to answer yung questions po ninyo kung meron. Alright? May mga questions na po ba? Alright, habang naghihintay ako ng mga questions po ninyo, baka hindi nyo pa po kasi na-like yung aming Facebook page, that is our Facebook page. We would really appreciate kung makakapag-iwan po kayo ng kahit short feedback or review doon sa page po namin. We will really appreciate those po. Alright? So, may mga questions na po ba? Alright, sandali lang po ha. I-recognize ko po kayo. Alright, si Ms. Remedios Parado.
Yes, good morning po.
Good morning po. Go ahead pa.
Na-discuss po kanina yung may makapag-register dito sa ArriveCam. Bago po ba, mga ilang days po ba bago kami mag-flight, or paano po ba yung tamang schedule ng namin dito, pag-login?
Right, basta before po kayo umalis, no?
Right.
Not too
Right sa
early.
airport lang. Okay.
Apa, kahit doon po, Abel, mas maganda po kasi kung ang recommendation ko kasi is i-print nyo po yung yung receipt. So, mas magandang gawin yan before po kayo umalis ng bahay.
Okay. Diba? Okay. So, on the day.
Basta technically, may submit nyo po yan before kayo mag-board ng flight.
Okay.
Pero if you want to print yung receipt, gagawin nyo po yan bago umalis ng bahay.
Okay. Got it. Thank you, sir.
Ayun lang pa. Alright. Kung may mga follow-up questions mamaya, raise nyo lang po ulit yung kamay po ninyo. Alright? Ma'am Cristel?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning po.
Sir, may question lang po ako regarding sa pagdadala naman ng jewelries. Meron po bang restrictions para doon?
Alright, that's a very good question po. Wala namang restrictions. Again, kailangan nilang pong i-declare. Kung may mga questions po doon, kasi kasama siya sa item actually. So tatanungin magkano yung value, so hindi siya problem. As long as these are personal items, wala siyang problema. Nagiging problema lang yan, not only sa jewelries and other items, kapag medyo commercial na in volume, doon lang siya nagiging problem. So otherwise, hindi naman siya problema. Basta i-declare lang po.
Okay po. Tapos another question po, para naman po doon sa may mga co-op placement, yun po ba ay separate permit or nakalagay lang din siya sa remarks ng study permit?
That's a very good question. That is a separate po na permit.
Okay, sir. Thank you po.
Alright, sige pa. Miss Debbie.
Hello, Sir Apple. Good morning.
Apple, good evening po ba dyan sa inyo? Alright, sige pa.
Medyo maaga pa po, 7 p.m.
Alright, sige pa. Ano po yung
Alright. Yeah, ang tanong ko po is yung sa vaccination ng below 12 years old. Kasi dito po ngayon, like dito sa British Columbia, nag-start na kasi yung vaccination for 5 years old until 12. So binook ko po yung si OWP ko at yung 2 kids before ng end ng program ko ng December 19.
That's very good.
So, opo. So, ang ano ko po is, yun po, meron kasi akong 7 years old. So, magpo 14 days quarantine pa ba sila kasi hindi vaccinated yung 7 years old, or paano po ba? Kasi sa Philippines, alam ko hindi pa nag-start yung below 12 eh.
Hindi po sila i-require na ng quarantine kasi considered minor pa.
Okay. Kasi kanina narinig ko din lang sa news dito na nag-start na silang magdala ng mga vaccine Pfizer for kids dito sa mga pharmacy and sa hospital nga po. So ang worry ko lang, baka hanapan din yung anak ko, galing siya ng Philippines, hindi pa kasi ino-offer sa atin diyan.
Hindi naman pa. Hindi naman po siya magiging problem.
Okay, sige. Ang second question po, follow up dun sa COVID din, is yung eldest ko po is 13 years old. So yung second dose niya will be on December 6. So ang nakabook ko na flight, although hindi pa naman siya nako-confirm, binook ko lang po, is December 16. So that is 10 days after ng second dose niya. So kapag dapat ba na talagang explicitly 14 days after the second dose, or po pwede yung 10 days? Baka or magko-quarantine sila or what? Or kailangan i-move?
Okay, here's the rule. Ito yung general rule po. Fully vaccinated or not, kailangan nyo pong mag-prepare ng quarantine plan. Okay? So, yung decision kung ma-exempt sila sa quarantine for 14 days will be made by the officers doon sa port of entry.
I see. Okay.
So whether na-comply yung 14 days na inoculation or vaccinated or not, so it is best na i-assume nyo po na i-require yung quarantine. So having said that, mag-prepare pa rin po ng quarantine plan. Ngayon, kapag sinabi na hindi required yung quarantine plan, then hindi nila kailangan mag-quarantine. Siyempre, may mga cost consideration. What if bayad yun na yung 14 days na yun? So, ang difference lang is, mas mahirap kasing gawin yung quarantine plan on the spot, right? So, lahat ng umaalis po, talagang may prepared na quarantine plan. So, kung halimbawa, bayad na yun, then ang difference lang is, pwede silang lumabas doon sa quarantine place kung hindi required. Pero kung required, at least ready na po sila. So if you'll ask me po, i-prepare na po yung quarantine plan.
Alright, okay. Dito naman po kasi sa British Columbia, meron silang sa website ng government, ng province ng British Columbia, meron silang checklist for quarantine.
Yeah,
I mean, yung form, yeah. So, fill outan lang. So, yun yung papakita lang po na, na quarantine plan.
Yep. Do you have more questions pa?
Yep. No, no. That would be all. Thank you po.
Crisabel Yalbuena. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, good morning po. May mga i-confirm lang ako, sir, kasi medyo mahina yung wifi ko kanina.
Okay,
Confirm ko lang yung regarding po dun sa medical insurance. Bali, arrival ko po kasi is December 10, then January 4 po yung start ng pasok po, di ba? So wala pa po kung hindi pa po covered yung insurance ko po nun.
Ano po yan, ma'am? Sorry.
Wala pa po ako medical insurance po nun. Yung arrival ko po like 28 days before po nung start ng pasok.
Okay.
Wala pa po ba ako?
Anong school po kayo, ma'am?
Pansyo po.
Ang Pansyo College po, nag-start yung coverage nila 30 days before yung start na class.
So meron na po ako pag dumating na po ako doon?
Apa. Pero better po to confirm. Kasi prior to pandemic, ang start ng coverage po ng insurance coverage ng Pansyo ay pag nag-start yung school. Pero starting ng pandemic, in-extend nila yan na 30 days before.
Okay po. Tapos may question pa ako, sir. Kasi po, allowed po ba ako na mag-travel po sa ibang city? Like for example, pupunta po akong London kasi sa London po yun. And then magta-travel po sana ako ng Alberta. Doon sana ako mag-spend ng Christmas. Pwede po ba yun?
Okay, may mga considerations. Kailan kayo after ng quarantine po ba yan? Or ano? May mga assumptions kasi tayo. I-require ba kayong mag-quarantine or not? Pero technically, walang problema po. As long as fully vaccinated po kayo.
Okay. So pwede naman po ako magpunta-punta doon parang like once a month ganun?
Walang problema po.
Wala naman pong problema pag pupunta po ako ibang city. Like for example, Vancouver, then lipat po ako ng Calgary, ganyan. Wala pong problema.
Dami nyo pambayad sa ticket mo.
Kaya-confirm ko lang kasi parang may nabasa po kasi ako dati sa Facebook, may bawal daw mag-travel. Kailangan ko saan ka nag-aaral, doon ka lang daw pwede.
Fake news po.
Fake news po yan.
So, pwede kayong mag-travel po.
Pwede naman. Tapos po last question po, yung halimbawa, pwede ko po bang, halimbawa po is bank account ko po kasi is BDO, pwede ko siyang i-withdraw doon sa Canada?
Kung meron po kayong debit card na may Mastercard or Visa sa card, pwede po.
Okay po. Okay po. Sige po. Thank you. Yun lang po yung question ko.
Yun lang pa? Alright. Sige. May mga questions pa po ba?
Hello, good morning, sir.
Sir Ferdinand. Yes, sir.
Morning po. Sir, tanong ko lang po, itong itong presentation na pinipresent mo, i-upload ba to sa website natin, sir, dyan sa Gateway? Yung at least para ma-review din namin later on yung
Yes, apa. We will do that po. In fact, this is being recorded. I think it will be uploaded sa YouTube channel po namin.
okay. And then follow-up question din po sir, yung ito ngayon po ba ilang weeks na po ba yung yung allowed tayo na mag-enter na po ng Canada? Kasi meron kasi akong nakita before na lang 3 weeks daw sabi nila, so hindi ko alam kung ano yung talaga ngayon, kung ilang weeks na pwede na tayong pumunta ng Canada.
Okay, that's a very good question po. Alright, context po muna. Alright, a little bit of a background. No? Prior to pandemic, the earliest you can enter Canada as international student, mga 3 months before yung start ng school. That was pre-pandemic period. No? Pero nitong nagkaroon ng mga travel restrictions, ang suggested pa rin po is not more than 30 days po.
So not more than 30 days.
Not more than 30 days po. Actually, wala talagang written na policy yan o rules, whether sa CBSA or sa immigration. Pero by practice, ang nire-require is mga earliest yung 30 days. Medyo marami po kasing problem na kakibat yung pupunta kayo ng Canada earlier. If for example, pupunta kayo 3 months. So ibig sabihin, kailangan magbabayad kayo ng 3 months na insurance. Kasi nga, hindi pa kayo covered ng insurance policy at that time. Kung magre-rent po kayo, so ibig sabihin, mag-uumpisa na yung rent po ninyo ng earlier. No? Pero yun ay kung i-consider natin yung financial considerations. No? Main consideration there would be, will you be allowed entry kung super aga? So medyo risky pa rin po. Maraming nakita po namin yan, may mga nagsasabi na allowed na, pero wala talagang official reference po yun as far as the Canadian government policies are concerned. So we wouldn't recommend po na mag-travel kayo ng more than 30 days prior po yung start ng school. Not now at least. Kailan niyo po ba balang mag-travel sa Canada? Ilang days po before yung start ng school?
Di baka sa amin talaga is baka less than 30 days pa nga sir. Kasi nandito po kami sa Saudi ngayon. And then, yung yung end sa work is mga December 18. Pero even before December 18, kasi yun yung ko sa office. And then January 10 po yung yung start ng klase ko po sa Centennial. So less than 30 days. So sigurado less than 30 days po kami. So at least okay naman po.
Fully vaccinated na po kayo?
Opo.
Okay,
yung 4 yung anak namin, pero yung yung 17 at saka yung 13 fully vaccinated na. So pero yung 10 years old ko at saka 7 wala pa kasi hindi pa nag-start po yung yung vaccination nila. So kaya wala pa yung 10 and 7.
That's okay po. So yun, so ang travel po ninyo, basta meron kayong 14 days before yung start ng school. May mga kamag-anak po ba kayo na matutuluyan just in case?
May mga kakilala naman po sir na may mga nag-offer din na silang doon kami titira. So
okay.
mayroon pa.
Alright, ang concern ko lang po kasi is yun, maghahanap pa kayo na matutuluyan, etc. So kung mayroon naman po palang arrange na, so that's even better. You should be okay.
Kasi marami kami, 6 kasi kami kagad. O nga medyo.
Hindi man lang tayo nagkita, sir.
Oo nga. Sir, follow-up question lang po. Yung binanggit mo kanina about yung study permit, yung sa mismo dun sa immigration, doon po ba namin makukuha mismo sa immigration, yung printed na yung study permit, yung work permit, yung sa...
Tama po. Sa immigration border po sa Canada.
Okay po. Thank you so much, sir. Yun lang po sa akin.
Alright, sige pa.
Sir, sorry po, yung sa yung sa proof of fund, yung follow-up question, sorry po, yung tawag nito, yung ano po ba yung mga masasabi natin na yung mga documents na yung bank certificate or yung nabanggit mo kanina about credit card or yung sa proof of funds, pag tinatanong ng doon sa immigration, yung paano natin i-support.
Okay, depende po kasi yan sa circumstances po ninyo. Bayad niyo na po ba yung 1-year tuition?
Opo.
Okay,
Pati
wala
may GIC.
May GIC po ba kayo or wala?
Mayroon din po.
Okay, yung GIC niyo po is I suppose mga 20,000.
Yung inano ko before, 10 lang po, sir. 10,000.
So, magkano po ba yung required po sa inyo na living expenses? 4 yung anak po ninyo, no?
Opo.
So that
Apat
is
po.
12 plus 4, 16 plus 10, 26. So kailangan nyo pa ng extra 16,000 Canadian dollars.
Opo.
Yung $16,000 po ba madadala po ninyo?
Kaya.
Opo. Yung ano yun, ika-cash ba yan, sir? Or by cash?
Pwede pong cash, pwedeng bank draft.
Okay. So kung
Ngayon,
bank draft,
kung dala nyo po yung 16,000, regardless kung cash yan or bank draft, hindi nyo na kailangan ng mga bank certificate or anything like that po.
okay. Kung
Kasi ang mahalaga, meron kayong dalang budget for at least 1 year.
okay. Okay naman po, sir, yung
Alright?
thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Alright, sige po. Debbie.
Sir Apple, last na kasi na-mention nung ni Mr. Ferdy yung about doon sa yung sa port of entry nga. So doon sa OWP, so yung OEC na nabanggit niyo po kanina na dapat naming i-print for him para mapakita sa visa officer. So aware din po ba yung dito sa port of entry sa Canada, yung visa officer with regards doon sa open work permit na hindi nila kailangan ng job offer?
Okay, so yung OEC po, ang purpose po nun dito sa Philippine side, hindi siya sa Canadian side. Kasi ang rule po kasi kapag workers aalis ng Pilipinas, may rule kasi yung POEA, kailangan meron silang exit clearance. Right? Kaya lang yung open work permit exempted doon. Kaya lang minsan yung mga immigration officers dito sa Philippines, hinahanapan sila ng OEC. And yung iba na hold yung flight na hindi natutuloy yung pag-board sa flight nila dahil hinarang
Ito pa lang, sa Philippines pa lang.
Apo. Ngayon, dahil proactive tayo, mayroon tayong ipinapaprint po na memo mula sa POEA. So yun po yung purpose po noon.
Yeah, kasi nung dumating po kasi ako dito sa Vancouver, meron ako nakasabay kasi na couple, yung babae, yung student, and then OWP, yung spouse niya. So parang na-hold sila and then hinahanapan din siya ng visa officer doon ng job offer kasi nakita na work permit. Nakalagay nga doon is open work permit. So ang worry ko, kaya natanong ko kung aware sila na hindi ko lang alam kung nung napakita. Basta yun yung feedback last time.
Yeah, basta dala po yung letter of introduction, tapos yung marriage certificate, yung copy po ng study permit po ninyo. By the way, dapat meron din siyang kopya pala noon kung hindi nyo kasabay. So, kailangan mag-print din po siya ng study permit.
Ng study permit ko.
Tama pa.
Okay. Sige. Thank you, Mr. Apple.
Alright, sige po. I'll see you in Vancouver soon.
Yeah. Thank you.
Ma'am Cristel.
Hi sir, question again.
Sure, ako. Kaya po tayo nandito ngayon. Walang problema po yan.
Yun kasing BVL ko sir, yung biometric validity letter. Until now, hindi ko pa rin siya nare-receive. Magkakaroon kaya po ako ng concern doon kung aalis ako ng wala nun?
Hindi naman siya part ng requirements po.
So,
doon po ba nakita niyo po ba yung screenshot po ng inyong GCKey account, yung sa portal po, kung merong biometrics po doon na cleared na?
Meron pong, ang nakita ko kasi sir bago pa na-approve, meron siyang details, parang biometric information, pero dun sa biometric, dun sa baba sir, hindi nakalagay na completed, parang nakalagay pa rin is we require.
Okay.
So ayun, hindi pa lang po ulit ako nakahingi ng update.
Okay,
kung
so we will check po
completed.
yung ano nyo, yung portal kung merong nakalagay doon. At least as an alternative doon sa BIL, kahit yung screenshot na lang po doon sa portal po ninyo. Sino nga po yung inyong documentation specialist?
Si Miss Irish po.
Miss Iris. Alright, sige po. I'll ask Iris po to send you yung latest na screenshot. Pero hindi po siya problema kasi in the first place, hindi mapaprocess yung visa po ninyo kung wala kayong biometrics. Alright?
Okay.
So, tsaka hindi po siya hinahanap doon sa whether dito sa Philippine immigration or immigration doon sa Canada.
Okay, sir. Tapos
Kailan
sir,
po ang travel nyo, ma'am?
December 10 nga tapos January 10 yung school. So kung calendar days, parang more than 30 days siya. Okay lang po kayo.
Medyo maluwag naman po siya ngayon. Basta ano po, December. Wala naman pong problema.
Apo. Parang 2 days lang naman yung difference ata.
Apo. By the way, nakuha nyo na po ba ang inyong jacket? Yung Gateway to Canada jacket?
Hindi, sir. Meron po ba? Hindi
Opo,
ako
meron
aware.
kami. Kaya lang yung recent lang po kasi kami nag-open ng office. Pero kung hindi kayo this goes for everyone, no? Kung hindi niyo pa po nakuha yung mga Gateway to Canada hoodie, pwede po kayo pumunta sa office, book lang ng appointment or email po kayo sa amin ng delivery address po ninyo and then papa-courier po namin.
Ay, okay, sir. Sige, sir. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Sige po. More questions po? Mukhang wala ng mga questions. Alright. So, mukha namang nasagot na natin yung mga questions. But again, of course, hindi naman ito yung huli nating interaction. So kung may mga questions po kayo eventually, book lang po kayo ng appointment para ma-address po natin ang inyong mga concerns. Alright? And for those na hindi pa po nakakapag-iwan ng review sa aming Facebook page, baka naman. Alright? So we would really appreciate po kung makapag-review po kayo sa aming Facebook page. Kung wala na pong mga questions, that probably ends our session for today. Again, pwede po kayong mag-book ng appointment with me kung may mga follow-up questions po kaya. Alright? That being said, maraming salamat po. Ingat po tayong lahat. Bye!
Thank you. Thank you, Apple.
Thank you
Thank
po.
you, Sir Apple.
God bless.
God bless po. Thank you.